Hey, Debbie, thanks so much, and welcome everybody in our audience to today's webcast, Self-Service Management for VMware in 30 Minutes, the Convert Advantage, sponsored by Accelerite. I'm Chris Flack with Virtualization Review and virtualizationreview.com, and I'm here to be your host for today's event, so thank you all for joining today's webcast. We greatly appreciate that. Now, just a few quick things before we get started with today's presentation and introduce our speakers and get underway. Just a couple quick reminders. First things first is we will be recording today's webcast for future viewing and listening purposes. We'll send you a link to the email you registered with within 24 to 48 hours after the presentation is over. Please feel free to share that link with coworkers, colleagues, friends, anybody who may be interested on today's topic. We would greatly appreciate that, so thank you. Also, today's webcast will have a Q&A at the end of the session. However, at any point during the presentation, if you have a question for our presenter, please feel free to use the Ask a Question box on the left-hand side of your console. Just feel free to fill out, hit submit. It'll be sent off to myself, and hopefully we'll get to everybody's questions at the end of the broadcast today. If we don't get to all your questions, don't feel too bad. We'll make sure somebody from Accelerite gets in touch with you to the answer to your question if we don't get to it. So thank you. Joining us for today's webcast, we have a really great presenter. His name is Arsalan Farooq. He is VP of Products at Accelerite. You can see his information right there on the screen. But he's got numerous years of experience in the IT field. He's done numerous presentations with us. He gives really great information out, so you all are in for a real treat today. And with that, I'll step aside because you didn't come here to hear me speak. So why don't you take the floor, Arsalan, and get started.
Chris, thank you for that kind introduction, and good morning, everyone. Once again, Arsalan Farooq. I'm responsible for the cloud and data center products over here at Accelerite, and basically to set the table for today, we're promising talking about delivering self-service over your current VMware environment in 30 minutes. So the way I was hoping we could approach this today was essentially share with you a little bit about what we're seeing in the data centers today, where this need for self-service is coming from. The interesting thing about that is that for some of you it will be self-evident, but for others, they've heard a lot about it and they're wondering what the brouhaha is about. So we're going to, I'll give you my view of where the need is coming from, and then some options and some ways in which we've seen people approach the problem and say, okay, how do we self-service enable our existing virtualization environment? During the process, I'll talk a lot about what is the right way to do things and how to do them, and then you're welcome to disregard everything I say, because until I see you show you the demo and show you that the stuff that I'm talking about exactly working, hold your confidence level a little bit. So goal is to show you what I talk about, and then we'll go from there. So hopefully you'll enjoy yourselves. Okay, so let's dive right into it. If you were to perhaps look at your own data center, or certainly the data centers we see today, it's a pretty neat and clean setup when it comes to virtualization and cloud workloads. I mean, we've got certainly virtualization still predominantly the workhorse inside data centers. We've got a pretty high level of penetration. You guys have been running your virtualized environments for some time with VMware, and some of you with Hyper-V and KVM, etc. So you've got certainly your virtualization environments in there. Then, certainly we've got some public cloud that we're starting to see at the other end. I think around 18 to 24 months ago, we started seeing a significant penetration of AWS projects into data centers, be they dev test or QA or even some production instances, just running part of the workloads of your IT infrastructure into the public cloud. And then we have this entire notion of the private cloud, or on-premise cloud, if you would. And that's what we're here to discuss today. So there's been a lot of talk and hype around private cloud, on-premise resources, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what I was very curious about was that what is it that's really driving the use case? And when we went out and took a look at some data around there, as well as anecdotal as well as hard data, what became very clear is that the primary use case for private cloud, or on-premise cloud, if you would, turns out to be most CIOs or chief architects saying, look, I've got people who are sitting there, expensive IT, highly trained, highly capable people, and what they find themselves doing all day is just sitting there and handling requests for adding a VM, removing a VM, adding storage to a VM, memory, etc. Just mundane tasks, and they would like basically to be able to deliver that to the end user, self-service, free up these resources, and have them do important high-value stuff. And so it turns out that delivering your virtual machines as a service or as a self-service in the self-service context is the primary driver that we have found, and others have found, people who do this type of research, to be the reason people are looking at private cloud, which is obviously very interesting. So it's a bit of an uncomfortable place we're in when it comes to self-service management, I think. What we've heard is okay, so you want to free up your IT resources. You can get a lot of agility. You can get your highly capable, more expensive guys working on more useful stuff, and deliver the self-service, which is basically very, very quick. Your end users are happy, be they internal or external. It's very, very quick. You're obviously saving a lot of money, both on OpEx and CapEx, and you're very flexible. So, I mean, most people inherently understand the benefits. However, it is not quite that easy. I've spoken to, I would say, 50 or so CIOs and chief architects, and while they understand why they want to get self-service, the holdup is that, hey, look, when somebody says I want self-service or I want to deliver a private cloud type self-service infrastructure, what we are dealing with is, okay, well, let's just go out and look at a self-service platform. Maybe we'll look at OpenStack. Maybe we'll look at CloudStack. Maybe we'll look at something else, vCloud. And it's a new environment, a new edifice you have to stand up, and you have to train against that. You have to do compliance. You have to do procurement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And not only that, but if you start going out and type in private cloud or self-service into Google, you'll be bombarded with just ridiculously confusing messaging. And it becomes very hard to make a decision, even if you have the resources to embark on bringing in yet another infrastructure vertical into your environment. So benefits are clear, but there's, the road is not very easy. And so what was very interesting to us was to get to the core of what people were looking at. And if, we think of them as what the bare minimum, the self-service essentials are. And this is to be used to cut through the hype and the confusion in the marketplace. And essentially, after so many interviews and after talking to so many people and looking at our customers, et cetera, what came very obvious was that, look, when you talk about delivering self-service over your environment, all you're really looking for is you want the provisioning to be self-service, you want to be able to have a service catalog, and you want the entire thing to be used in a managed environment, in a managed sense. So you need to have quota controls, you have access control, and you have a multi-tenancy and network isolation. As long as you get that, that's all you need. A lot of the platforms that are out there in the marketplace deliver a lot more than this. They're throwing the kitchen sink, and quite often you don't need that. All you need is just these 4 or 5 bullets. Okay, so that was our key realization. So, since we're talking about VMware, let's see what VMware has to offer in this area. So, I'm assuming most of you have heard of both the vCloud Director and the vRealize Automation suite. The vRealize suite with the vRealize Automation piece, previously called VCAC. That's kind of an interesting thing that VMware is doing, because, whenever I look at their messaging, the very first thing that strikes me is, when you type in, VMware self-service, these two things show up, and the question is, which one is the right for me? vCloud Director, they've got all this material around that. This thing called vRealize Automation, or VCAC, they're talking about the same, and I'm utterly confused. Okay, so what am I supposed to do if I have a big VMware, vSphere ESX farm, and I want to start delivering some self-service over it? So that's the first point of confusion. To this day, I remain a little confused about this. The next thing is, let's just dive into it. I mean, okay, so maybe we pick vCloud Director. Somebody I know has used it or something like that, and so, okay, well, what are we looking at there? Well, it's severely problematic because, first of all, right off the bat, it's being EOL next year or in 2 years' time. So, okay, well, that's not a long-term investment, obviously. It's been terminated as a product. It's been just recently been retargeted. Initially they were offering it to all of us. Now they're just saying, okay, so the service providers only. We're going to kill it. It's a relatively complicated prospect, both from a procurement and architecture perspective, as well as the fact that it brings along its VMware tax. So it's before we even get to actually using this as a viable solution, we run into a lot of problems with it. And it's not at all clear. And I've spoken to many people. They say, look, it's very hard to get on board vCloud Director at this point because it is expensive, of course. It is complicated. Plus, also the entire confusion VMware have around the product category is very problematic. Okay, so I have a friend at VMware. I went to talk to them, and I said, look, it's very hard for me to think about vCloud Director as a solution to my self-service problem. So he said, no, don't worry about that. Look at vRealize Automation. That's where you should be. Okay, well, fantastic. So let's go have a look there. Well, here's the problem. First of all, vRealize Automation, VCAP, previously Dynamic Ops. I mean, this is basically a rules engine. And, we went out and talked to a bunch of people who had actually vRealize Automation or had given it a shot. And it turns out that, it's a good kind of an infrastructure rules engine piece, but to get it to do anything, you need to put in a lot of consultancy services or an internal development project. And you've got to add those recipes, those scripts that make it actually do anything. And it's scoped to be very, very large. Everything ranging from your VM configuration all the way out to infrastructure and self-service. It's basically everything but the kitchen sink approach. No migration, limited in its capability to actually do anything. Great in its ability to model stuff, but very limited in its ability to do anything. In fact, just day before yesterday, I was talking to a CIO, and they, just as anecdotal evidence of this, they said, they've got a sweet deal with VMware. They're some sort of a partner, and they get most of the software for free, and VMware gave them vRealize Automation for free. They said they ran it. They're trying to get self-service in their environment, big VMware shop. And so they got vRealize Automation, and he said, we used it for 2 weeks and threw it out because we realized that we had to build everything ourselves in order to get it to do anything. So again, not a very easy thing to do, a very, very high price to pay, both in terms of dollars and resources in order to deliver self-service, if all you want is self-service, using either one of these solutions. And with lurking in the background is this confusion about, okay, vCloud Director, vRealize Automation, what's the scope, where do I go? What do I do? And I am just reflecting what I've heard over and over and over again. I've tens of anecdotes like the one I just shared with you around the confusion if you have a big VMware environment and you're looking to deliver self-service. So it's got to be a better way, no? I mean, if you think about it, this is what your environment probably looks like. You've got a bunch of VMs. You've got ESXi running with most probably vCenter running on top. Alternatively, some of you may be just running vSphere directly. And this is sort of the canonical VMware environment that you see in the world out there today. So what would a right solution look like? I mean, what should we do here? Well, let's have a look at what we would really like to have. So obviously, if you want to deliver a private cloud or self-service, you would like to use what you already have and already know. Very critically, I've heard this over and over and over and over again. The just give me self-service. I don't need every single bell whistle, network service this, storage service that, this, that. Just give me self-service. I've got my environment rigged up. I've been using my VMware environment for a long time. Just let me deliver that infrastructure as self-service. Don't have me build the next great project just to deliver that. And finally, nobody has any interest in rewiring, retraining, retooling, re-architecting their infrastructure architecture, as you would have to do if you were to bring in a dedicated new platform to be able to just deliver self-service. So there's no interest in that, at least in the people that I talk to. Well, and this is the refrain, right? This is the frustration. They're saying, look, I've got everything. Why can't I just deliver it as self-service? Why do I have to go into all these shenanigans to do it? So we took our lead from that, and we said, okay, well, let's just shoot for that then. And what we did was basically said, okay, you keep your environment as it is, and you deploy Convert. And what Convert will do is very simply just go and deliver self-service right on top of your existing environment. And that's the approach we took, and that's the approach we deliver. And no fuss, no muss. Nothing extra, nothing extraneous. Just no rewiring, no retooling. Use what you have, what you know. So, and that brings us to our product, which is Convert. And essentially, just to introduce this, it's basically a centralized management system, which allows you not only to do self-service, but also it actually allows you to manage your day-to-day operations. So it's not just some specialized point solution. It's actually something that you can use as a proxy for most of your management consoles and do day-to-day operations as well as configure and deliver self-service. And we've done quite a few other webinars, etc., where we talk about other capabilities. But today we're focusing on how it integrates with vSphere or Bear or vCenter. And how we can use it to deliver self-service on your existing environment. All right, so that's pretty much what we have here. And now let's just get down to the actual demo, which I'm sure you guys are patiently waiting for. And let me kick that off here. So let me switch over to the demo screen here. Bear with me. So what you see here is the Convert Enterprise Cloud console. This is what you get when you attach to our management server. And in the way of an introduction, let's just go over a couple of elements here. So this is actually attached to our live demo environment. So what we've got here is some of the taxonomy of objects that we have in our environment, the assets that we have. So for example, we've got if we click here, we've got a VMware vCenter environment, as you can see here, and we've got some basic statistics showing up about that here, which we'll come back to later. We also have a bunch of other assets in our data center other than VMware. So we've got a Hyper-V environment, it looks like. We've got some ESXi stuff going on here, KVM, etc., etc., etc. So the entire data center is actually discovered right here. In addition to the data center, we actually have some external resources. So we've got an Amazon account that's been declared here under the infrastructure as a service category, where we can see what our assets are out in Amazon and what the various usage and CPU and storage parameters are around that. So just along the theme of seeing everything in one place. And then we've got a definition of some of these what we call virtual data centers. Think of these as self-service environments, self-contained, that have a self-service console attached to them. I see that we have one called QA Pub, and you can basically see very, very clearly what's been going on over here. And you can see the storage usage and what kind of instances are being used, etc. Since this seems to be a looks like an Amazon-based backed VDC, we can basically see some Amazon artifacts showing up here. But anyway, so the point is that you can, in one single place, you're looking at your vCenter environment, your other environments, your other hypervisor environments, your cloud environments, and then of course all of the virtual data centers or the self-service environments that you've built using these assets in one place. It's a very powerful way to sort of manage your heterogeneous assets. But today we're here to talk about the VMware stuff. So let's just go and have a look at what we've got going on for VMware here. So here's a vCenter. We're seeing things like virtual machine densities 3.0. Forgive me, there's not a lot of activity going on here. It is a demo environment, and under that we see some pools. So here's a pool, 2 hosts in there. These are VMware vSphere boxes, and we get to see right here from within Convert what's going on. We are seeing what capabilities are enabled. If there are any notifications out there, how many virtual machines. You also get some very, very top level, actionable items like what are my top 5 CPU usage servers. So if this may need some attention, because not here, but if there were any machines that were actually getting hypervisor hosts that were getting beaten up quite a bit, you would see that here, surface to the front. Similarly, the VMs, memory. So basically, it's a one-stop shop dashboard where you can see how your VMware environment is performing and whether something needs attention. Of course, it's all available for all the other platforms we have as well, but today we're focusing on VMware. You can also graph and slice and dice in many different ways over here to see what the performance profile is. Similarly, you have some configuration information. Here is a nice one. I can see actually what the breakdown is of the operating systems that are being run in this particular server pool. You can see what the servers are, any alarms that have been raised, thankfully none, and all the tasks that have been, so there's a complete audit trail of all the tasks that have been performed against that environment. So, the bottom line is, let's just pull this open. Oh, okay, so I see that on this VMware host, we've got a few virtual machines that are defined. Similarly here, these are all virtual machines. They seem to be all stopped at the moment, but you can do things like attach to it, start, stop, pause it, reboot, all the general take snapshots, etc. All the general day-to-day operations tasks that you need to perform against your VMware environment, and indeed any other hypervisor environment, are available right here within the console. Okay, so that was just to show you the fact that you can discover your vCenter or straight ESX vSphere environments into Convert and basically get your job done on a day-to-day basis using this. But how does self-service enter into this? So the key capability we're here to see is how can we use this, let me just call it the flat virtualization environment, just your basic run-of-the-mill daily, very familiar VMware environment, and start delivering self-service over this. The scenarios could be something like you've got a large VMware pool or multiple pools of VMware hosts. You're being driven into the ground trying to take care of nitty-gritty operations things, picking up the phone. Hey, can I have some more memory on my VM? Hey, can I have some more storage attached to my VM? Hey, can I have 5 VMs of this, of an Ubuntu server, blah, blah, blah. And I think that most people now recognize that most IT guys have better things to do than that. And so the idea would be, can I just take the virtualization that I have already, I've had for the past 5 years or 10 years, however long you guys have had your VMware environment, and just without touching anything, without adding anything new, just start delivering that capacity in a self-service fashion. So a classic example that we're using internally ourselves is, hey, the QA guys tend to want environments and they want them to be brought up and torn down at a quick basis, and they just can't wait for us the IT guys to come in and help them with that. So ideally, what we'd like to do is give the QA guys some capacity over this VMware environment, and let them just self-manage that. Okay, so let's take a look at how we model that here in Convert. So you notice this. We talked about this IaaS platform that we have currently. Amazon is declared, and our model is basically, you declare all of the infrastructure as a service assets that you have here in the IaaS, and then carve that out as these self-service, quota-managed, multi-tenant virtual data centers. So you build virtual data centers out of your IaaS assets. So here, for example, this one is built out of our Amazon asset. You can see basically this is a data center. I could go ahead and create another one backed by Amazon, and so on and so forth. Now, can we do this? Well, Amazon's very obviously geared towards self-service usage, but can we do this with our flat virtualization? Well, actually, we can. And what we're going to do here is, let's see if we can take this environment and make that available as a VDC, as a virtual data center, which essentially is a self-service capability to be given to our end users. So the first thing is, obviously, we carve out these virtual data centers out of our infrastructure as a service assets. So we don't have one that represents this VMware, this flat virtualization environment. So let's go ahead and add one. So when you say add an IaaS, you want to declare one. Well, we can use Amazon, which we already have one instance of. You can have OpenStack. But here we're going to declare a local infrastructure, which basically says, look, I've got virtualization sitting around. I want to turn that into an IaaS, style private cloud. So let's do just that. Well, I'm doing it for my QA team. So QA, let me call it QA private cloud, just to make it very clear. So okay, that's going to be what my local IaaS instance is going to be. That's going to sit next to Amazon here. Okay, so where am I going to get this local capacity from? Well, what it's listed here is all of the server pools you have in your environment. We wanted, if you remember, Converter was the one we wanted, so we'll just take this server pool and say, hey, look, take the resources of this server pool. It just happens to be flat virtualization VMware. And turn that into this IaaS private cloud style instance. Okay, good. Next step, networking. So what do we have here? Okay, well, let's look at it. So we've got some predefined networks that are in your environment that have been declared to Convert. These would generally be your basic internal backbone that you have. You may have segmented your environment, and these are public networks, public as in public in your intranet. And if you want the QA team to have access to those networks in their self-managed environment, you would basically go ahead and click this and say, okay, good. The other thing we do is we say, look, you can pre-allocate. So generally, you guys have a separate set of guys working in the NOC, and they can provision a VLAN ID pool to you, which you would use for your virtual networking. You can declare those pools and basically say, okay, well, this IaaS is going to have access to a particular VLAN ID pool range that it can use as it wishes. So once again, we're actually building a what one might call an on-premise private cloud style infrastructure, overlaying that over the flat virtualization that we have in our VMware pool. Again, an important question: do you want any public IPs to be available to this particular cloud instance? We'll just go ahead and they've been declared, so we'll say we'll use those. And now we come to the service catalog. Okay, so you're declaring a new cloud. What kind of services or templates do you want available to people who will get access to those virtual data center resources? Well, let's just go ahead and just click a couple. Okay, well, we'll just click this one too. So these will now become available to users of that. In fact, why don't we click all of them? It will become available to anybody who gets access to this IaaS or private cloud instance. And the final, last but not least, an extremely important observation is that, what is the software-defined networking going to look like? Is the SDN going to be provided externally, or actually what you can do is you can say, look, I'm going to go ahead and provide an SDN server, which, by the way, ships with Convert networking server, and basically that's going to provide our network service for our cloud. So essentially, to be able to allocate and deallocate IP addresses, provide DHCP services, etc., 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 to basically the private networking that's going to take place in there. Okay, that's looking good. Let's go ahead and click Save. And so what has just happened, notice, is that the QA private cloud that we just talked about, which remember is backed by your flat virtualization here, actually showed up right next to the Amazon as an IaaS, infrastructure as a service resource, to be carved and delivered in a self-service fashion in terms of virtual data centers. So from this point on, the QA private cloud that we just created over our virtualization, our flat virtualization, is to be treated exactly the same as, and it has the same capabilities that, for our internal purposes, that something like Amazon or OpenStack or some other IaaS would have. And so here we go. And let's see if we can actually create a data center. So QA private cloud IaaS instances there. Remember, virtual data centers are these environments that you carve out to be delivered in a self-service fashion to your end users. And so let's go ahead and see if we can go ahead and provision a virtual data center. So here we go. Select the IaaS. Well, we have two in our environment. We can create a virtual data center self-service console out of Amazon, or, staying with the theme of VMware self-service in 30 minutes. Here we go. QA private cloud. Let's select that. Okay, good. So that accepted it. That's good. That means I didn't mess up in creating the private cloud instance out of our VMware environment. Now let's give it a name. So now we're going to give, there are multiple teams that I can give access to here, but what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and give the QA team QA VDC, cryptic name, and this is self-service resources for the QA team. And we go to templates, and remember we actually had a bunch of templates that were, or the service catalog that we made available. Now we can select out of these which ones we want to give to this particular team. So maybe we just want to give them these three. Networking. Here, remember we had that SDN capability that we outfitted this private cloud for. We will have now the ability to have that create a virtual network. We can see if the admins inside that self-service data center are going to be able to allow additional private networks. Let's not do that right now. Do I want to give them access to these guys access to that external network? Why not? And here comes the killer. At this point, I can actually, for this particular team, for this particular QA team, I can go ahead and say, look, here's the box around you. You can run. Well, it's a small environment, so I'll just say, two virtual machines at the same time, and I can go ahead and say you can provision 4, and then you can basically give memory limits. You can say your vCPUs are limited to 2 each. You're allowed 100 gigs each. I mean, these are just sample numbers, but the point here is you can create one private network, and you can have access to up to 2 public IPs. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically drawing a box around how much of that QA private cloud resources this particular virtual data center can have for the people who have self-service. And so it's quota being provided at that granularity. Now we go to users and groups. Who has access to this new VDC we're creating? So just go ahead and let's find out. So we say, okay, well, we've got a bunch of users here. By the way, these users, this is fully integrated with your LDAP environment, so you can just bring up your LDAP environment and use that. So we'll just go ahead and use Rhea here. It's already created. and you can go ahead and give RIA either the operator role or a user role. These roles have to do with whether they can create and those networks we talked about and other resources, are they just going to be an end user that just provisions and that just basically uses the environment that's created. So here we go. We've got RIA and the operator. Okay, looks good. Let's go ahead and click OK. So guess what? Just like we had created, we had a pre-created data center against Amazon, we now have a pre-created virtual data center against our internal VMware resources. This acts and behaves just like any other virtual data center, and this is the back end of the self-service console. And so now you can see what the usage is, you can see all of your quota limitations here, etc., etc., etc. And here's our little audit trail going on in the back here, showing us what we have been up to. So there you have it. You have basically, just to summarize, we just within a few minutes, actually, we went from having a flat virtualization environment based on vSphere to saying, hey, we want to use that as a private cloud, just like I use Amazon just as an infrastructure as a service element. And then now we're starting to carve away. Now, if we want, we can just go here again and basically, here, provision another data center against the same QA private cloud. Say something like QA, VDC team 2, and go through the entire flow again, and again from exactly these resources provision yet another, carve out another team with self-service access, and keep delivering these until we run out of capacity. So that's the model. Just continue to carve this up into as many teams as you want, as many data centers, VDCs as you want, and go from there. Okay, so that's essentially, what we're sitting in front of is the Convert administrator, IT administrator console. Now let's have a look at what RIA's experience is, somebody who's on this QA VDC team. So let's go ahead and cut over to our let's see, where are we here? Okay, there we go. So this is just another browser, and what they will do is they log into the console. So they'll see this RIA, and then we'll see another RIA, and here we go, log in. And what is happening now is we are seeing the experience that QA VDC owner, operator, remember that operator we set up for them, sees. So when they log in, they see this is the self-service console, and what they see is only that which was available to them, or made available to them a minute ago by us, the IT administrators. You can see that they actually have an overview of what's happening. Well, this is a new data center, not much going on here. They do know that what their quota is. They can manage that right here, or actually observe that right here. See how much they have, how much they've allocated. They've already used up. Remember, we said build a private network, so they were allowed one. They've already got one. No virtual machines, the networking, etc. They see that they have the access to that public network. They have the default network that was created by the SDN service. And so now, but notice one thing: there's no mention of VMware or Amazon or anything over here like this. And if we had built this out of Amazon, it'd be the same thing. If we had built it out on top of Hyper-V or something else, it'd be exactly the same thing. A standardized self-service experience, and it's here. It's right here. So all they will do then is they will say, okay, let me go and provision a virtual machine. There we go. So this is, QA bug blitz 1. So maybe, the bug blitzing is a bug blitz environment going on. Here, let's make this a Windows instance. Or actually, let's just go ahead and do bug blitz probably on this one here. Okay. We can go to network. Any public IP is required for that. Okay, why not? Maybe. Or maybe not. Let's just forget it. It is a bug blitz thing. So we see what kind of storage is being allocated. This is all coming from the template, the service catalog. You say yes, and what ends up happening is that you see that the task subsystem has picked up the job that you're trying to create a QA bug blitz 1. And as that happens, as the thing is in the process of being provisioned, you will notice that you immediately see here that your quota usage is being updated in real time, telling you, look, you were allowed this much memory, you've already picked up this much, and et cetera, et cetera. So now all we would do is we would say, okay, good, let's go ahead and start it. And again, I am the QA administrator. This is the only environment I have. I can create it. I can use it. It's my own virtual data center. It happens to be backed by VMware vSphere. I have no clue about that. I'm just using my quota, and I'm just basically trying to get my work done here. So if I connect to this, let's go ahead and use this. And I think that was an Ubuntu instance that we mentioned here, and so all we're going to try to do now is to just connect to it. Here we go, right in the console, and there it is. The environment is up. Now I can go ahead and mess with it, do whatever I wish, and proceed that way. And so now, pretty simple. We are able to as the VDC user, just go ahead and start using my environment, and that's it. Switching back over to the administrator's console, I can see that indeed, the QA VDC guys are already using this. I'm over here too. I can monitor what kind of stuff they're using, what they've got going on, etc., etc., etc. And as I said, hey, another team comes up, we just go ahead and use that environment to provision another data center right in that private cloud, and on we go. So, as promised, just to recap, we saw the fact that we have a virtualization environment with vSphere here, integrated with in this case, instead of direct vSphere, we've got integration with Virtual Center. We just said, look, we want to build this environment. We want to continue using this environment. We want to use it like a private cloud self-service type offering. And so here we just went in and said, okay, we already know Amazon. Let's just add another cloud that we've built kind of on top of this. And then we've started carving away and handing out the self-service capability. So within minutes, you have full self-service capability. Hope this is very clear. So we're very, very proud
basically
of this,
summarizing once again. I mean, we've basically seen how we can take
hopefully you'll find some use for it too.
the
So now
VMware
let's,
environment and centralize
switch
that,
back to the
as well as how do you go ahead and use your flat virtualization resources to develop an IaaS instance, and then go ahead and start carving it up on a per need basis. So, no massive new infrastructure to deploy, no retooling, redesigning. You're basically using what you have and what you know, as promised. So hopefully you guys were able to get a sense of how we've approached the problem. And the key benefits, of course, just to summarize once again, are essentially what we set ourselves to do. The task we set ourselves was deliver self-service and deliver the things that are important in self-service, and do it in a lightweight and quick to deploy model. So you don't have to rewire. You don't have to, like you do with vRealize automation, launch a development project or get a consultancy firm to come in and develop recipes and scripts so that the rules engine can drive your environment. You don't have to basically go ahead and procure new infrastructure, etc. It's just lightweight. You got your VMware, you deploy Convert. It is an agentless architecture. You discover your environment, and the next thing you do is you pick up where the demo picked up. You start using multi-tenant cloud type usage right out of that. We also think that it's future-proof because one of the things that we didn't spend a lot of time on today was the fact that this is a fully multi-hypervisor, multi-cloud system, and all the capabilities you saw today around VMware are also available for Hyper-V and KVM and OpenStack and what have you. And the advantage of that is that today we're seeing a lot of people who are using VMware, but in the future you might want to wish to have the option of using other platforms. Some of you already are, or include cloud. the self-service you're delivering will always remain standardized. That self-service console, that RIA experience you saw, is going to be the experience for all of your users now and in the future, irrespective of which IaaS or VDC is what is backing those, whether it's coming from Amazon or whether it's coming from OpenStack or it's coming from your flat Hyper-V or flat VMware KVM, wherever it's coming from, the end user experience is a standardized self-service experience, and that has a lot of importance. I'm sure you guys will agree. And finally, I mean, no VMware tax here. We're not priced to compete with VMware. We're priced to deliver value to you. So with that, I think we're at the end here. Hopefully you found this useful. I'd like to thank you for your for attending this. And my hope is that you guys were able to you can find some good use for the work we've done here. And with that, I'll turn it back to the moderator.
Yeah, thank you so much, Arslan. Excellent job. Thanks for your presentation and your demo. Really much appreciated. Okay, so if you have a question for Arslan, please feel free to enter it at this time. We've got a couple minutes here before we finish out the presentation. So please feel free to submit your question via the Ask a Question box on the left-hand side of your console, and we'll get to as many as we can before we close out. Okay, so the first question here comes from Randall, and he was curious, would you mind discussing the licensing model? He says he has quite a large VMware environment, so he wanted to see potentially how much it could be. Would you mind expanding on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the licensing model is based, is actually, we've tried to keep it as simple as possible. So the way the licensing works is you essentially are sized by the number of physical sockets that you have under management. You can get, so for example, if you're mentioning you have 35 ESXi hosts, so I would say if these are a dual socket host, so that you basically are licensing 70 sockets. And you get unlimited VMs, you get unlimited memory, unlimited storage, unlimited pretty much everything else. So it's a very flat model. It allows you to control your costs very, very quickly. If you are also using this capability to deliver self-service over non-physical entities, like say for example Amazon or others, then it's a similar charge, but it's a per managed VM charge. But in your case, you'll basically be licensed for 70 sockets, assuming you have dual socket hosts. And that's it. It's a flat fee. It's a subscription model or a term license model, however you prefer. We're very flexible in that. And I can assure you that the costs are going to be nowhere near what you would get if you were interested in paying the VMware tax.
Got a question here from Wayne. He is asking, can you put an expiration date or lease on the VMs so that you can control VM sprawl?
Yeah, so I mean, the entire notion of retirement, etc., is there are multiple ways to do this. We can do retirement, we can set a retirement time period when you provision a VM and there are ways to retire entire environments, although they are usually done using integration with a policy system, which we do provide. So there are multiple ways of doing it, depending on what your needs are, but all of them are possible, really.
Question here from Mike. Mike is asking, can I target resource pools in vCenter for the VM creation location?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that. If you mean that you've got some VM, you've got a resource pool in vCenter, and you want to use that, yeah. I mean, when you attach Convert, when you bring up Convert, like we saw in the demo, you can discover your vCenter instance. You can attach to it, and then use the pools you have in there. Mirror them here. Easily, and then just start using them the way I was using them. So I mean, you can think of, for example, in the demo, you remember this pool called Converture. That could be very easily a pool inside your vCenter, and it could be imported from vCenter, and then you just proceed from there. So the answer is yes. I think I understood. I got the thrust of your question here, hopefully.
I got a question here from Danny. Danny is asking, can you customize the Quest OS, and how is it done? Does it use the native customization script like in VMware, or do you have to use your own?
Okay, so we don't have any requirements whatsoever about what happens inside your VM. So you can use whatever you're using currently. If you're using some VMware scripting, that's perfectly fine. If you have another platform or something else, or you're running some configuration management or storage virtualization scheme, whatever you're doing inside the VM, you can continue using it. We don't require anything extra, and that's the key. The key is, if you have workloads and if you want to create workloads, etc., you are able to you don't have to go and change the way you rig your guest operating system in order to use the scheme. Whatever you're using today will continue to work transparently here. That actually was a design goal.
All right. Thank you so much, Arsalan. Much appreciated for your presentation today. We've got through all the questions we can for the time today, so much appreciated for those of you in the audience for asking. If we didn't get to your question, don't feel too bad. We'll make sure somebody from Accelerite gets back in touch with you once the presentation is over. And don't forget, I know a lot of you are going to want to watch the demo again. Please feel free to tune into the replay of the webcast. The link will be made available within 24 to 48 hours after the presentation is over, so please feel free to actually go back in and view the demo again. You'll be able to get the slides for the program today. So I know a couple people had asked, so please feel free to view the replay for those things. But a big thank you to everybody who joined us for today's webcast, Self-Service Management for VMware in 30 Minutes, sponsored by Accelerite and brought to you by Virtualization Review and virtualizationreview.com. We appreciate everybody taking time out of your busy day to join us, and we hope that we talk to you again soon, everybody. Please have a great day, and take care. Hey, Debbie, thanks so much, and welcome everybody in our audience to today's webcast, Self-Service Management for VMware in 30 Minutes, the Convert Advantage, sponsored by Accelerite. I'm Chris Flack with Virtualization Review and virtualizationreview.com, and I'm here to be your host for today's event, so thank you all for joining today's webcast. We greatly appreciate that. Now, just a few quick things before we get started with today's presentation and introduce our speakers and get underway. Just a couple quick reminders. First things first is we will be recording today's webcast for future viewing and listening purposes. We'll send you a link to the email you registered with within 24 to 48 hours after the presentation is over. Please feel free to share that link with coworkers, colleagues, friends, anybody who may be interested on today's topic. We would greatly appreciate that, so thank you. Also, today's webcast will have a Q&A at the end of the session. However, at any point during the presentation, if you have a question for our presenter, please feel free to use the Ask a Question